لو سمحت بصفتي أنا
لا أجي زيكم.
لا بفهمش.
ليش فيش معه ولا واحد فلسطيني؟
أنا هنا بني آدم بيجي بقول لك أنا تعال، أنا بني آدم، لا أنا مع إسرائيل وأنا مع فلسطين. أنا بني آدم جايك من برا حابة أفرجي صورة الطرفين. أنت اللي بيجي يصور قضيتك كان قاعد تطرد فيه.
What is Zionism?
Zionism, wow, you're heavy.
Okay, Zionism, depend who you ask.
Zionism is the basic belief of national self-determination of the Jewish people.
هي منظمة صهيونية احتلالية احتلت فلسطين وأنشأت وطن قومي لهم.
I would call it the freight train of history, the inevitable return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel after thousands of years of exile.
It is a theological interpretation of the connection between this dirt, this land, this country, and the people of Israel, therefore the people of the Bible, therefore the people of the church, etc., etc. So it's kind of a domino effect.
I pray every day 3 times that God bring the spirit back to Zion. This is for me Zionist.
It's like above religion. It's more connection to the people with each other.
Can anyone gain a clear perspective on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by watching the media?
I don't think so.
When people look into this conflict, they look at it from a very polarized stand. Pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli, pro-Israeli, anti-Palestinian. And churches in the US are fighting over our conflict.
Welcome tonight. My name's Todd, and I'm super stoked you're here tonight because you're interested in learning about the Jewish people and about Israel and why they're important and how you actually play a role in that grand story. I became a Christian at a very young age, and loving the Jews followed suit. It was really natural for me. For years, I've been leading tour groups to Israel for my church. And to be honest, I always saw the Palestinians as my enemy. And at times I would see the Palestinians as even getting in the way of God's plan for Israel. A couple years ago, I was challenged by one of my seminary professors to look a little deeper into what life is like for Arabs living in the Holy Land, and to explore this conflict from both perspectives. I've studied the conflict for a long time, but you can't understand a conflict on the other side of the world without stepping into it. As a Christian, I think it's crucial that I understand why I believe what I believe about the Holy Land. It's such a complicated situation. There's so much pain and trauma on each side. So many opposing viewpoints. I want to sit down with people on both sides of the conflict, hear their stories, and gain a clearer perspective. It's a scary thing for me. I'm sure I'll learn things that will challenge my way of thinking. I hope the people I meet will see my heart as genuine towards them. The challenge for me is, how do I love and support the Jewish people, and yet love and support the Palestinians at the same time? If my theology doesn't compel me to love my enemy, then I need a new theology. I've spent a lot of time in Israel, but I haven't spent a good deal of time in the West Bank, where most Palestinians live.
This is Star Street. It's the street that Joseph and Mary would have come on to give birth to the baby Jesus. And in Bethlehem itself, we don't have so far an all-out war like in other areas, but you never know when an uprising happens that shuts the whole thing down. So people are not investing because there is no stability.
Where does that go up to?
To one of the monasteries, and from there it goes into the old city market.
It's beautiful. I wish I had my rollerblades to go down it, but I forgot them today.
When people look at me as a Palestinian Christian, they ask me, when did you convert? The assumption is that, Palestinians are Muslims, and then somehow through missionaries from California or from
Of course, they all come from California.
They came and converted Muslims to become Christians. In 1948, my grandfather was killed in the war, and my grandmother and her 7 children were kicked out from their homes by the Jewish forces and became refugees. And that is what led us to Bethlehem. The reality that I grew up in was a reality of the Israeli military occupation. And our basic freedoms that, being born in the US, I am so proud of to say as an American, were simply denied for us here. And so as a child, I grew up being very confused by 2 narratives. A narrative of a family that follows a faith that says we are called to be peacemakers. We are called to reconcile with those who are violent towards us. And a reality that says it cannot happen. The wake-up call, I guess, came to me when I had decided to read the scriptures once, Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount, and I was struck by 3 words that my first reaction was, Jesus, I wish you never said these words. And these words were, love your enemy. As Palestinians, yes, we have the right to be free. We have the right to live in dignity and respect. We have the right to determine our own destiny as a people group. And we could do that through nonviolence.
Anything in the name of nonviolence, this is what they want to stop. They are here because we are demonstrating.
Nakba means catastrophe. Our independence is their Nakba. The fact that Israel built a sovereign state in 1948, that we were able to win the war, and they are the one that paid the price for losing the war. No one wants to deny the Nakba. The Nakba is a reality.
As a little boy, what were you taught about Israel and the Jewish people?
I didn't need anybody to teach me about Israel. Growing up in Jerusalem, the only Israelis that I've ever met were either settlers with guns and soldiers. I saw soldiers beat up children. I was beaten up at least once a week. Most Palestinians have only seen Israeli soldiers and settlers, and I tell you, they are not very friendly.
When an Israeli kid sees an Israeli soldier, he thinks to himself, I want to be a super soldier. When an Arab kid sees the Israeli soldier, he thinks, I want to be part of the resistance. So therefore, the soldier represents an endless cycle of violence.
Israel have a very good intelligence. So if we get a piece of information about some Palestinians that intend to do something, we catch these people, we bring them to court in Israel. If they found guilty, they are going to jail. If not, we are sending them back to the West Bank.
If an uncle of mine commits an act of violence, I get denied my permit to go and work in Israel. I become unemployed. I cannot feed my family. There is no justification for collective punishment.
Leveling the Halabi family house was Israel's retaliation for the deadly stabbing attack carried out by one of the Halabi sons. Mohammed murdered 2 Israelis in the old city of Jerusalem.
Mohammed is a hero for us.
Well, he sacrificed his life for us. Giving money is the least we can do.
You are fighting for this land, and the other side is also fighting for this land. You don't have future to think about. You have only to think about conflict. So the only thing that you can see is death.
What do you guys think about the soldiers over there pointing their guns?
It's not a problem between the Jewish and the Palestinians. The problem is between the government.
The governments.
The problem is in the political situation here.
Got these IDF guys pointing rifles, and seems like a little much. But then I talked to the guys, and they said that somebody actually threw a bomb at them yesterday. Things aren't always what they seem at first. I think if I grew up here and I saw IDF soldiers all the time with their guns out and even drawn on me, it would have an effect on me. Definitely would. I think it'd be easy to hate them. The Jewish people were established in this region around 1900 BCE. For the next 2,000 years, they were conquered and displaced by various empires, but always made it back to the Holy Land. After 2 failed revolts against the Romans in 70 and 135 CE, and over 1 million killed, the Jewish temple lay in ruins, and the people were exiled from Jerusalem. Some Jews remained in the land, but most were dispersed across the Roman Empire. In the 2nd century, the Romans renamed the territory Palestine after Israel's ancient enemy, the Philistines. After the Romans, several different empires conquered and lost the Holy Land. When the Ottoman Empire conquered Palestine, also known as southern Syria, the area was settled mostly by Arab farmers, who rented their land from wealthy Ottomans living far away. In the late 1800s, massive waves of anti-Semitism broke out in Europe and Russia. Many Jews began immigrating back to Palestine and purchasing land, with the goal of re-establishing a Jewish homeland after 2,000 years. This national movement was known as Zionism. During World War I, Britain defeated the Ottomans and took control of Palestine. The British expressed support for the establishment of a Jewish state in their ancestral homeland. Tensions between the Jews and the Arabs in the region intensified. The armed conflict began in 1929, when nearly 70 Jews were massacred in Hebron over rumors that the Jews were planning to destroy the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. During the Second World War, the leadership of the Palestinian Arabs worked in conjunction with the Nazis to eliminate Jews from the Holy Land. After the Nazis murdered 6 million Jews in Europe, international support intensified for the establishment of a Jewish state. When the British refused to open Palestine to unlimited Jewish immigration, Jewish militias violently resisted British rule, so Jews fleeing Europe could safely reach the Holy Land. In 1947, with civil war now raging between the Jews and Arabs in the land, the United Nations adopted a plan to partition Palestine into 2 states, one Jewish, one Arab. The Jews accepted the plan, but the Arabs rejected it. On May 14, 1948, Israel declared independence, and 5 surrounding Arab nations immediately declared war, joining with other Arab fighters in the land against their shared Zionist enemy. But Israel survived and expanded the borders of their new state. Egypt took control over the Gaza Strip, and Jordan took control over East Jerusalem, as well as Judea and Samaria, which became known as the West Bank. During the war, at least 800,000 Jewish refugees were forced or pressured to leave the surrounding Arab states where they had been living for centuries, including the West Bank, and were absorbed into Israel. Approximately 150,000 Arabs were allowed to remain in the new Jewish state. But sadly, about 700,000 Arabs became refugees after they left either willingly or were forcibly displaced by the Israelis. Many Arab descendants of the 1948 war are still classified as refugees today and live in UN-funded camps in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Gaza, and the West Bank.
The tragedy of what happened to the Palestinians is that in the post-World War II era, when you had population exchanges taking place all over the world, the Arab states surrounding Israel said, we will never grant citizenship to Palestinian refugees. And they're the only post-World War II people that are still living as refugees.
This camp lies on 1 kilometer square. There are around 17,000 refugees. This is a community by itself. You can find rich and you can find poor, you can find religious, and you can find like everything in any community, you can find it here. You know, it's less than 1.5 meters.
Yeah, you can't even stretch.
Yeah. And here you can see the noise and assuming like there's someone who's sleeping inside. Or studying inside. Or doing
driving crazy.
Yeah. Even though like we are in this situation, it's even better than the Lebanese and the Syrian ones. Wow. Comparing to them, it's like a high fancy city.
Wow.
Yeah.
How are some getting rich and others are poor? Are they just getting better jobs?
Yeah, better jobs for those who are actually working in Israel. But according even to the working permit, there are conditions that you have to meet. You have to be married, you have to be plus 25, you have to have kids, you have no security issues. And the most important one, you have to find someone who employs you, who want to employ you inside.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah. 300,000 Palestinians are unemployed. Out of what? Out of 2,200,000, some stuff like this. The majority of us are youth.
Regardless of whether you see the Israelis as good guys or bad guys, you cannot deny the suffering of the Palestinian people. On one side, there's the people who are suffering a lot. And on the other side, there's the people who are just trying to exist.
The first experience that really made me begin to understand how to love my enemy was when I was invited by Jewish friends of mine to go with them on a retreat that they hold every year in the death camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau. Honestly, I say in Auschwitz, I discovered who my enemy is. I discovered the narrative of fear that existed within the Jewish community. And not just from the Holocaust itself, but from centuries leading up to the Holocaust, the violence, the injustice, the discrimination against the Jews that made them reach a point where self-preservation and self-protection became a core issue.
These people, the Holocaust survivors, and the Jews in large, I think drew 3 main lessons from the Holocaust. The first is that there will always be a Gentile, a Goy, who is after us to kill us to perform the second annihilation. The second lesson is that the other Goyim, the other Gentiles, are going to stand aside and do nothing to help us. And the third lesson is that we have to have a safe haven, a refuge, a sanctuary, an Israel, in order to be safe and guard that Israel with every measure, with every mean possible, whatever it takes.
The Jews are little minority inside this ocean of Arabs and Muslims here. And they are the ones who might be oppressed if they will be weakened.
Israel lives in a very tough neighborhood. There's a constant threat from all directions. From Sinai, from Jordan, Lebanon, Hezbollah itself, they had 100,000 rockets pointed at Israel that can be launched at any second. And you have rockets in the south from Hamas.
How do you think radical Islam contributes to the conflict?
I was born in Gaza. In my society, Shahada is the most privileged thing you can get into. So I was hoping in that day that I will become a shaheed for the sake of the land. I used to dance at my school because some Jews are dying, even children.
So, tell me what happened the night of the attack.
I was with my 3 friends. It was a party. We want to dance, just to dance. I was in the line near the discotheque.
So you were outside still?
Yeah.
Leanna was next to you. You and her were next to each other.
Leanna was next to me.
The suicide bomber was in line with you?
Yes.
Days since we declared the unilateral ceasefire. We extend a hand for peace. This has been by far the worst terrorist attack. Young people, innocent civilians.
Leanna closed me with her body, so because of this, she died, and I know.
How many people died that night?
21.
21. What age were they?
16, 15, 17. Children.
Children.
All of them children.
1,420 Israelis were killed over a 3-year period in terrorist attacks. In Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Haifa, every single city in Israel got it. It was a turning point for Israelis in the sense of looking at the Palestinians and saying, so are we going to allow them to be the security which is supposed to stop terror attacks from coming to Israel? You guys aren't going to do it, we're going to do it.
Most of the people in the media, they always show you these concrete walls. But really, this big project of 451 miles long, 95% are wire fences, only 5% are concrete walls. I tried all the time to find the right balance between the security needs and the rights of the people on the ground. We were fighting the Palestinian terror, but not the Palestinian people.
Why wasn't the wall built in a way that would create a sense of honor for the Palestinians? 95% of the wall is built inside the West Bank. And a lot of the wall goes actually much, much deeper than just to say even a few kilometers from the Green Line. It goes really deep into the Palestinian West Bank areas.
Often the wall separates between a farmer and his land. There are many of these cases where they cannot sell their products.
In the areas that it does come onto the West Bank side, what's the reasoning?
The West Bank is dominating Israel. It's on the mountains, and most of Israel is down the valleys. So you have to be on the top of the mountains for security reasons.
Some people claim that these security walls are actually apartheid walls, and they are there to separate ethnicities, Jews from Arabs.
Yeah.
Do you believe that's true?
I mean, it doesn't fit the reality here. Nothing ethnic here.
What was apartheid? Apartheid was that you have bathrooms that white people can go to that black people can't access. You have education that white people can access and black people can't access. You know where that exists? That exists in every Arab state around Israel. That's exactly the way that they treat the Palestinian refugees that have been there for 70 years and have no citizenship, no public education, no public medical services. These countries say, oh, they're the problem of the UN.
Every day enter to Israel more than 30,000 of Palestinians that work in Israel.
Checkpoints actually controlling my daily life and restricts my right of movement, even between the Palestinian cities, because closing one checkpoint means separating the south and the north of West Bank in one touch.
Each time I go across the checkpoint and they didn't stop me, and I ask myself, are they crazy? What if I was a terrorist?
I've been told Palestinian women who are pregnant have actually died when they need to give birth, and they can't get to a hospital on time because of an Israeli checkpoint.
About 7 years ago, we got information from the Secret Service that there was supposed to be an ambulance coming through a checkpoint with a suicide belt. And the ambulance is coming with the sirens and everything, and a pregnant woman, 9 months pregnant, and what do you know? Under her mattress, there was a suicide belt. I personally seen it in my eyes. I don't know of any situation that someone was deliberately stopped at the checkpoint and lost his life doing so. If anything, the IDF always assists with medical treatment if someone is in need.
Look at the general trend where people are denied access to hospital, access to schools, access to their own farms. And in this way, try to see what is causing the pain.
This checkpoint serves the southern part of West Bank. So people from Hebron and Bethlehem, they cross from here.
So how far is it to walk through this checkpoint here?
2-3 minutes,
Okay.
and it's in 5 minutes you will be crossing the checkpoint.
But
It's not jammed.
This is jammed.
This is jammed.
Why don't you just work over here?
There's no work.
There's no work here.
Yeah.
So you go to
And
Israel.
the salary is maybe less than half.
Okay, thank you. I hope you get to work. Have a good day. If this wall came down today, what do you think would happen?
The life of these people will be easier. We will not know exactly how many violent attacks we will witness against the Israelis. It's a kind of paradoxical issue. The facility of life or the freedom of movement and security.
When the wall was put up in 2002, essentially all interaction with Jews and the Palestinians quit. It ended. Because Area A is off limits to Jews and Israelis, you do not see Jews on the streets in Bethlehem, not to mention Nablus or Ramallah or any of the Palestinian Authority major cities. And so the ideologies that are hostile toward Israel were then isolated from the fresh air, from the nourishment of interaction with people. And so what you have here in the West Bank now is a hostility toward Israelis that is almost understandable. They no longer have any interaction with them. The only way they understand Israelis or Jews now is what they see in media, which basically reduces all Jews, all Israelis, to caricatures. They become the other.
This wall, on the one hand, it definitely stops terror attack. On the other hand, unfortunately, I don't believe in fences. I believe in education. I believe in good. And when there's a wall, it's very difficult for good to go through.
Todd's falafel stand. Best falafel in Bethlehem. Can I have a job?
Yeah.
I make a good falafel. Yeah.
People here in the Palestinian territories are lovely people. 99%, maybe more, are just wonderful. Christians who stand with Israel need to encounter this. They need to build these relationships with people here who are living in a very toxic environment that leads them to regard Israel and Israelis and Jews as the enemy.
Welcome. Morning. How old is he?
He's 2 years.
2 years? He's
2 years
cute.
old.
This is my wife, Renee, and my wife is pregnant with twins.
Yeah.
Very nice. Up high. To the side. To the other side. Down low. Too slow. Shukran.
You know why Arabic coffee without sugar? Because you're sweet enough.
That's good.
There was clashes here. One of their cousins was pregnant, and once she smelled the tear gas, you know, it affected the baby. So the baby came out in a way disabled due to the lack of oxygen.
دكاترة يعني بروفيسورية في هندسة قالوا إنه راح يموت.
كل شيء تمام؟ شوفي. Wait a minute.
Okay.
لو سمحت بصفتي انا
لا اجي زيكم.
ليش فيش معه ولا واحد فلسطيني؟
انا هنا بني ادم بيجي بقول لك انا تعال، انا بني ادم، لا انا مع اسرائيل ولا مع فلسطين، انا بني ادم جايك من برا حابه افرجي صوره الطرفين. انت اللي بيجي يصور قضيتك كان قاعد تطرد فيه.
I just wanted to meet a family and hang out and get to know.
This is what I was explaining to them. Those guys, they're just taking advantage of this conflict in a way that there are so many extremely pro-Palestinian crowds who are coming to these places, and they keep convincing those people, hey, you have to keep mourning. You are the refugees. Bash the occupation. Bash Israel. We will give you money. We'll support you. He was telling the family that we are going to meet today that we are Israeli intelligence. This is the conspiracy that we are living in.
I believe with my whole heart that when the security situation ever subsides, everybody on both sides will want this fence to come down, including myself.
You can see that in every section of the wall, there is a small hole. We call it the hole of hope. We can come with a crane and take it off. I believe that day will come and we'll have peace agreement with our neighbors. At that day, that there will be no frighten of terror anymore. I want to be the one that will take off the first stone of the wall in Jerusalem.
Describe to me the Palestinian church today, like the denominations and percentages.
The biggest two denominations of Christians are Catholic and then Greek Orthodox. Then you have smaller mainstream Protestant churches. Then there's smaller evangelical churches.
The Christian Palestinians are really between a rock and a hard place. And because of this, there's much immigration from the traditionally Christian areas in the West Bank. And I think the reason that many of them are leaving is, number one, because of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, but also they are discriminated as a minority. Within the Palestinian Authority, Muslims can't sell land to Jews because it's an automatic death penalty, literally. But Muslims don't sell land to Christians. Christians have twice a higher percentage of unemployment than the average Muslim.
We have to stay here in Palestine as Christians, not to live outside or find opportunities outside. We should believe in our country.
There's always the assumption that Christians, the connection is always with the nation of Israel. And so I get that prophetically, etc. I get that. But relationally, I have never heard a discussion about Palestinian Christians.
So I'm a Christian Zionist. I believe that God's not done with the Jewish people, and they have a right to live in the land.
Our challenge as Palestinian Christians here with 50 years of Christian Zionism has been one where we feel we have been continuously attacked and marginalized by our Christian brothers and sisters in
I
the
think
US.
I think you have. I agree with you.
And we need to.
It's not right.
And so that word by itself triggers in us something.
The War of 1948 was a catastrophe for the Arabs living in the Holy Land. Many Arab villages were encouraged by their leaders to leave their homes so that the invading Arab armies could quickly destroy their Zionist enemies. Some Arab villages were forcibly evacuated or fled in fear of Israeli forces. Brutal war crimes like rape and indiscriminate execution were committed against both the Jewish and Arab civilian populations. When the Arab armies lost, those who had left found themselves homeless. Most of the inhabitants were never allowed to return.
In 1948, this is one of 531 Arab villages and towns that were completely kicked out. Not very far from here, just up the hill, is Deir Yassin, the famous Palestinian village where over 100 Palestinians were slaughtered and killed. The Zionist militias, there was no Israel at that time. They were going out with speakers and saying, leave your houses or what happened in Deir Yassin will happen to you. Now we acknowledge that the Jews are victims of the Holocaust, but I refuse to be a victim of a victim. It's similar to the story of Exodus. The saving of one people came on the expense of another people. There is a problem with this. This is why, for example, I belong to Palestinian Liberation Theology movement. We don't take the story of Exodus as a liberating story.
In evangelical theology, the method is to dive into the Bible and interpret all of our experience through the prism of that experience of the biblical God. In contrast, the method of Palestinian liberation theology is to first mine the total Palestinian political and social experience of the last 200 years, and then go to the Bible and sort out what fits and what doesn't. And you find these parts of the Old Testament that are called Zionist by the Palestinian liberation theologians, like most of the Pentateuch and most of the historical books. And you pretty much throw them out because they're Zionist. They don't fit with your liberation theology, which is that God does not have a chosen people. All the nations are the same in his eyes. And so this now controls your theology. This is how you interpret the whole rest of the Bible.
Palestinian liberation theology teaches a lot about social justice and resistance.
When Jesus came to this land, he was under occupation of Romans. He was in very injustice situation. But the Bible telling us that he was surrender and give up to the one who judged by justice, which is God. And even in the Gospel of Luke, when the Jewish came up to Jesus and they sharing him about how the Romans killed some of the Jews from the Galilee, in my mind as a Palestinian, I was waiting for this such a strong response by Jesus and telling them, this is an injustice, that this is an occupation, we should fight it. And instead of this, Jesus simply replied to them, if you don't repent, your situation would be the same. As I said, I don't care about politicals, about this social and worldly justice. I care about your heart.
Jesus lived under occupation himself, and he never told anybody to rise up against it.
This is how you read the Bible, but this is not how the Palestinian churches read the Bible.
Well, tell me, help me.
You read it with a Western eye. If a Roman soldier asks you to walk a mile, walk for 2 miles. We read it as resistance. Roman laws said that a Roman soldier is only entitled to let people carry his heavy armor for 1 mile. More than 1 mile, they get punished. You have to do the theological...
That's tricky.
No, that's not tricky. I don't want you to be a friend of Palestine. I don't want you to be a friend of Israel. I want you to be faithful to Christ. If Jesus was standing with us right now and he is looking, what would he preach? You, powerful, I have a message to tell you. And you, the meek, I have a message to tell you.
I truly want to love and support my Palestinian brothers. Yet, I have this tension with the worldview and completely looking at Scripture different than I do.
The more you walk, the more you will hear stories. If you ask any Palestinian, what are your dreams? You will figure out that his dreams are actually his rights. I want some education to my kids. I want a dignified life to me and to my family. They're not asking for the moon.
What's this?
This is actually a symbol of the Palestinian right of return. When people fled their houses in 1948, they took the keys of their houses.
Tell me about these guys.
These actually for Palestinian prisoners who are spending life sentences in the Israeli jails. The Palestinian Authority's policy created a kind of incitement to commit violent attacks against the Israelis. Those who spend more than 5 years in the Israeli jails, they will get a salary forever, they will get the health insurance, they will get scholarship to study whatever they want, and not to mention the other privilege that their family will enjoy. You know, they will be perceived as the family of the hero.
Public media in a Palestinian society. So media, whether it's newspaper, radio, or television, which is actually controlled by the Palestinian Authority, calls for jihad or violent resistance against Israel.
While convicted terrorists are in jail, they get a monthly salary.
إن شاء الله وكل شهيد سيكون في الجنة وكل جريح سيكتب له الله الثواب.
اضرب باسم الرب ضرب الشهداء علّا وعلّا.
إذا بدك بطلع بستشهد عادي.
فمبسوط انه احنا اسم مدرستنا اسم شهيدة كثير مشهورة والها دور وعملت اشي كبير في الوطن.
These textbooks do not give Palestinian children an education, they give them an indoctrination that basically profoundly poisons the minds.
العمليات هاي تاعت الدعس والسكاكين هاي اشي بيرفع الراس لفلسطين.
Is the UNRWA education system educating for peace?
No. They're adopting the Palestinian curriculum.
In my country, in Egypt, and the Middle East in general, they never taught us about the Holocaust. All they said that Hitler killed 6 million Jews, and that's a good thing. And Israel is the eternal enemy, and Jews control the banks, the money, the media, the politics. They control a planet of 7 billion people. And I used to believe that.
As a child in Kuwait, we were told in school and in the mosque that Jews and Christians were the root cause of all the troubles in the Middle East. They want to conquer us, they want to destroy Islam, and they want to destroy the Arab world.
Can you imagine as a child you grew up in the Palestinian society, all what has been heard about the Jews, they want to kill us, they want to drink our blood. So what I felt is full of bitterness, full of hate.
Is this a minority way of thinking in the Palestinian territories, or is this the majority way? Does pretty much everybody think this way?
Yeah, this is the majority. This is the flow in general.
I'm hearing from Palestinian friends that there's an incitement on a national level to hate.
I do training for thousands of Palestinians. I have not heard what you're saying. You are completely misrepresenting and stereotyping based on your connections. No. I work from Nablus to Hebron. I work in refugee camps, I work in villages,
if it's a misrepresentation.
And I want to say,
it's not mine.
even if that is the reality, I want you to challenge your Israeli friends and saying, yes, I understand, all Palestinians hate you, okay? What are you doing about it to change? How are you showing a different manifestation to the Palestinians that maybe what their media is showing them, what their politicians are showing them?
How would he do that?
That's the challenge to them, and they need to come up with the answers. And the same on the Palestinian side as well.
In 1995, the Israelis and Palestinians agreed to take all of the West Bank and to divide it into 3 different categories. Areas A are Palestinian self-rule, Area B is Palestinian self-rule but Israeli security responsibility, and Area C, which includes all of the Israeli settlements without any exceptions, is Israeli responsibility and security rule.
We are going through a checkpoint in the middle of the West Bank.
That was pretty easy. I mean, we just drove right through. It wasn't...
Yeah, it depends on the situation. So today it's peaceful. Sometimes when they know, for instance, that there is a person who's suspected, the soldiers will be on high alert and they will stop all the cars and will start checking them one by one.
How's it going? It's like being in an outlet mall in California. I'd have never imagined.
Usually what people like to show in the West Bank is the poverty side of the Palestinians. That's why when television crews, Europeans, Americans come, they take them to the poor neighborhoods, the slums, but they're poor and they're rich. It's what you want to highlight, what you want to show.
Right there. I heard this is popular all over the Middle East. It's Hitler's book. It's about getting rid of the Jews.
We are heading to Hawara checkpoint.
So we just went through the checkpoint?
Mm-hmm. When there is no any violent waves, it's quiet everywhere.
So when it's peaceful, Palestinians can pretty much have free access of all of the West Bank.
Sure.
There's a big difference between reading about people in a society and actually going there and talking to the average man on the street face to face. Growing up, what were you taught about the Jews?
زي عرق اجى عشان يمحينا عن الوجود عشان يسيطر على مكاننا ياخذ دولتنا واحنا نموت نرحل مش مهم.
طول عمري بشوف اليهود انهم بكرهوا العرب وبكرهوا المسلمين يعني.
لغتهم السلاح والقوة. ما بفهموا بالحكي المناقشة معدومة عندهم بس سلاح.
What percentage of Palestinians genuinely hates Israelis?
كل الفلسطينيين.
70%.
70?
Yes.
Okay.
احنا ما بنكره اسرائيل. احنا بنكره عمايل اسرائيل. احنا ناس بدنا نعيش، بدنا السلام، بدنا حقنا.
Ah, that's him, who I just talked to.
They were all were the heads of Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades. They were fighting here. They were fighting in West Bank.
Oh, yeah, I see why he was in jail now.
We don't have any problem between Palestinian or Jewish. This is not the problem. The problem with just the Zionist. That's it.
اليهودية هي دين سماوي بس الصهيونية هي إرهاب.
I'm learning that they're distinguishing between Jews and Zionists. Once a Jewish person believes in a Jewish sovereign state, that's where the problem begins.
This is not his country. This is my country, my children's country, my grandfather, my grandmother.
وأنا كفلسطيني ما بآمنش في شيء اسمه دولة إسرائيل وما بعترف فيها.
Unfortunately, there are wild conspiracy theories that kind of become common knowledge on the street in the West Bank and the Palestinian society regarding Israel.
Do you believe the Jews were the ones behind 9/11?
Of course.
I believe so, you know, maybe.
مش متأكد بس أعتقد إن هم وراء العالم كله يعني دمار العالم يعني هم اللي.
Do you believe the Holocaust happened?
No.
لا اختراع من الصهاينة على أساس إنه يحتلوا يعملوا يساووا ويجي له بديل، لكن ما صار.
فهم ضخموا الموضوع وخلوه يعني إنه يشفقوا العالم عليهم ويحسوا إنه هم مظلومين.
وأنا أنت سألتني ليه بتخاف تطلع وجهك ولا لا؟ لو عندي 10 أولاد ببعتهم لأجل الأقصى كمان، فهمت كيف؟ وإحنا بنعمل بإشي مشروع، إشي قانوني، هم اللي بيعملوا إشي مش قانوني. إحنا لنا الجنة وهم إن شاء الله بئس المصير والنار.
So what do you think about the Jews returning to the land?
You know, I'm not sad about getting all the Jews from all the world here, because it's the start of the end of them. All of us here are Sunni. We respect our religion, our Holy Quran, our Prophet Muhammad, and we believe everything they say, okay? In the end of the world, be sure about it. When all the Jews come here in this land, you see this tree?
Yep.
When a Jewish person hiding beside it, this tree will talk to me. It will tell me, my Muslim brother, there is a Jewish person behind me, come and finish him.
And is this what most Palestinians believe?
Yeah.
So you believe that it's a good thing that the Jews are coming back to the land because it means the end is near?
Absolutely sure.
إسرائيل أنا لو أمسك صهيوني ولا إسرائيلي بقتله قتل موت. أنا بكرههم، ما بحبش إسرائيل.
يا أخي في الضفة اطعن.
Throughout the stabbing violence, the Palestinians endlessly would say that we would place a knife next to the stabber afterwards as if they didn't believe that it was actually happening.
بصفوا في الشعب الفلسطيني بيربع أو بشك فيه أو بيحكي اسمه بده مثلا يتسلى، يكون زهقان يتسلى وروح بطخه وبرمي السكينة قدامه، بيحكي عملية طعن. Gösterici vuruldu. İsrail askeri müdahale etti.
Is the scale of terrorism on each side comparable?
No. We are talking about massive terrorism from the Palestinian side, in much rare cases from the Jewish side.
Why the Zidane? Yes!
The military invests a lot in the training, in the understanding, and then I hear the individual cases and I realize that we need to be doing more.
Regardless to this conflict, for me, anyone who supports the Palestinian Authority in this situation is supporting the dehumanization of the Palestinians. The corruption and the dictatorship of the Palestinian Authority make this conflict worse and worse.
The Palestinian people have received more in donations than any humanitarian project ever in the history of mankind on the face of the earth. So what do they have to show for it? Where did the money go? Why is the average Palestinian still living in abject poverty?
The Palestinian peoples, I think that are really victims, but not victims because what do Israel, victims because what their leaders do.
You hear every day about financial support that comes to you as a refugee in order to make your life better. But on the ground, your life is not better anymore.
So you're saying the Palestinian Authority is allowing this situation to continue so they can get more money?
Exactly.
And you're saying it's not going to the people?
Exactly.
Where's it going?
To some specific people pockets. You are not allowed to speak. We don't have that right to criticize.
They're constantly arresting people, harassing people. Palestinian journalists, putting them in prison, beating them, maiming them for expressing political opinions, whether it's in a newspaper, on a Facebook page. So there's this fear factor.
A friend of mine, his name is Muhammad Jaber. He was taken in by the Palestinian Authority ideology, and he committed acts of terror against Israel. He went to jail. He was caught and he went to jail. But in jail, he started changing his mind. And then a friend of mine who was a Knesset member, one of Israel's parliamentarians, goes to his house and takes a picture with him, and he put it on Twitter. Well, guess what? The next day, the Palestinian Authority called Muhammad Jaber to their offices. They took him down to Jericho and tortured him for 40 days. Anybody who wanted to make a separate peace with the Jews has been taught, don't talk with them, don't be friends with them, don't talk about how good they are, don't talk about anything like that. You got to toe the line, or else we're going to do torture to you or worse.
All the Arab communities are honor-based communities. So if you lost your reputation in this community, you lost everything. If you were portrayed in your community as a normalizer, trying to make good and normal relation with the enemy under the current situation, in addition to losing your reputation, you may lose your life as well. What we think here as a product of this culture, that Israel is just the army. But there is another part that my culture and my education system and my authority prevents me to see it, which is the civil community, the other part of Israel that really opened my heart, away from the politics, away from the conflict, away from everything, a human to human.
The divide is deeper than I actually thought. It's more hopeless than I actually thought. And a land where Jesus walked and he transformed people, it seems so absent here. I feel like a heaviness for them that yeah, I feel a burden for them. In the book of Genesis, God made a promise to Abraham to make him into a great nation. He told Abraham that through this nation, all the peoples of the earth will be blessed. I believe my Messiah came through that blessing. The first believers were Jewish, and Gentiles like me came to faith as a result of their testimony. In Scripture, the olive tree symbolizes the place of God's blessing. The Apostle Paul gave a warning to Gentile Christians who saw Israel as rejected by God. Paul described the Gentile believers as a wild branch that God had grafted into the olive tree of blessing. He wrote, "Do not consider yourself to be superior to the natural branches. If you do, consider this. You do not support the root, but the root supports you." I love surfing, and I love Israel. So when I get to combine the two, it's a pretty special thing.
The reason why the Jewish have kind of a protection now, because they have a Jewish state. If they don't have a Jewish state, they'll be persecuted as all around the world.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state. We have a Jewish majority. And so if you're being persecuted for being Jewish anywhere in the world, there's one place in the world where you can come and you're 100% sure that you won't be persecuted for being a Jew.
Zionism has been equated by some as imperialistic, racist.
It's funny when we talk about Jews. Jews come in all colors, all shapes, all races all around the world. We have Russian Jews, Asian Jews, African Jews. So the fact that anybody calls Jewish self-determination as racist just shows the level of ignorance.
Many liberals which advocate for human rights in general, if it's women's rights, gay rights, they will advocate for that. But then at the same time, these same liberals will be against Israel. That contradicts itself from its foundation. If an Arab here is gay, he could feel free to go in Tel Aviv and feel very comfortable. He can't do that in Tehran, he's going to be hanged.
80% of the Israeli Jewish society are secular. So many different ethnic groups here, and all of them live together in coexistence because of being a Jewish democratic state with Jewish majority, and the more Jewish it is, the more democratic it is.
What does a Jewish democratic state look like?
Judaism is a religious culture. Democracy is our form of government. We have a democratic state with separation of powers, rule of law, checks and balances, the works. Just like there are 10 nations in Europe that have a cross on their flag, we have a Star of David on our flag. And in our national anthem, we talk about the Jewish soul longing for a homeland.
I have equal rights. I have a democracy state. I don't care about what's the religion of this state.
The only country in the Middle East that you have all the freedom to build your church, to worship, is Israel.
Growing up, what were you taught about the Palestinians?
They are people, just like me, just like you.
That they hate all Jewish people and they want to kill all of us.
That you should respect people as people no matter race, gender, and etc.
We may not agree with everything, but we could all coexist.
When I was a little kid, we used to take this bus through the Arab villages. We used to get rocks every time on the bus. We just knew they didn't like us, that's it. Nobody taught us anything about them.
How do you personally feel about Palestinians?
Neighbors.
I feel like they got their right to have their own country and to live in peace, in safety.
What percentage of the Israeli population genuinely hates the Palestinians?
Hate, maybe 5.
Less than 10%.
I don't think that people hate Palestinians. People don't want just to live. They don't want to die.
We interview hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinians, both in the West Bank and Gaza. And everyone we interview, we ask this question. If a Palestinian state is created tomorrow, where would you prefer to be a citizen? In Israel or Palestine? And we basically receive the same 2 answers from everybody. Number 1, obviously Israel. Number 2, please don't quote me.
Since you are a surfer, I thought it would be nice to introduce you to Roy. He was actually the first surfer in Jisr al-Zarqa.
What?
And today he's the lifeguard at the swimming beach.
Nice to meet you, Roy. Todd.
Roy can show you into the mosque.
This is the first mosque I've been in.
This is an Israeli Arab town. This village gets all the basic budget that every other Israeli town in this size is getting.
Okay.
They may not get the extra investment they make in Tel Aviv. The problem is that the local community didn't take the opportunity to fulfill themselves and their potential. Only me and small group of Israeli surfers who dared going in here, most of us just looking for waves, only us knew that it was actually a place where you can find not only an authentic Arab fisherman village and a beautiful beach, but also beautiful people. I thought it would be a great location for backpackers, and I also understood that for the village it could really help to develop the local economy. I decided to look for a local partner.
כמו שאר כל התושבים כאן, תמיד חשבתי וחלמתי לעשות דברים טובים כאן בתוך היישוב. ואז הגיעה נטע עם רעיון לפתוח גסט האוס בג'סר.
How did you feel about a Jewish woman approaching you and asking you to basically become her business partner?
מה זה בכלל משנה אם היא יהודייה או נוצרייה, צרפתייה, זה לא משנה. בסופו של דבר כולנו בני אדם. אני אחד האנשים שאני מאמין.
We were two people with this nice idea, but no money to start with. And we ended up raising 92,000 shekel from donors. All of them were Jewish Israeli people. Tourists who are coming from all around the world, but 40% are Israelis. I think tourism is a great tool to bridge the gap. You don't have to discuss the complicated issues between you. You are just becoming friends and getting to know each other in a personal level. In the last few years, the hostel opened and it inspired other people in the village to start their own business. When the government saw that, they decided to invest 16 million shekel in developing the fisherman port and many more millions in developing the rest of the village, building new neighborhoods, and I'm really happy about that.
The only place in our immediate neighborhood where you don't have Palestinian refugee camps or Palestinian refugees is Israel. Because we let 140,000 of them come back after 1948 and 1967. Today they make up 1.5 million of our Arab minority within our society. We have 16 out of 120 members of our parliament are Arab. We've had a Muslim Arab Supreme Court justice. Today we have a Christian Arab Supreme Court justice. We're more advanced in Arab civil rights than every European nation.
ביחס לעולם הערבי וכל מה שקורה, אנחנו פה בגן עדן, כאילו, הזכויות שאנחנו מקבלים כאן, זה לא, בעולם הערבי הם לא מקבלים.
Of course, some people are racist, but that happens anywhere in the world, and some people discriminate, but that's something that's a part of normal society, unfortunately.
Are there certain soldiers that have racist ideologies? Absolutely. But we also have a very good cadre of officers and commanders that are on top of that. There is no army in the history of mankind that has taken more precautions to save lives within the enemy society than Israel has taken.
I'm served in the Israeli Air Force and Rescue and Help Unit. The pilots was departing with the helicopters, and in many times they was find themselves in Palestinian areas and help Palestinian peoples, take them to Israeli hospitals.
The Jewish people have a commandment that's repeated more than any other commandment in the Torah to honor the stranger in the land. I want to see a society that has completely equal treatment for everybody. The way that we treat the stranger in the land is exactly the way that the international community will view us and the legitimacy of our government.
In the book of Genesis, God promised the land of Israel to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants. Later in Exodus, God makes a covenant with Moses and tells him that if the people obey his laws, they will live in peace in the land he is giving them. But if they break his commandments, they will be punished and exiled. Many of the biblical prophets foretold that God, in his mercy, would bring the Jewish people back to the land. Some Christians interpret God's covenant with Abraham as conditional, that Israel can only be in the land if they meet certain requirements. Others say it's unconditional, and that it's only dependent on God's promise.
The Abrahamic covenant is unconditional, the Mosaic covenant is conditional. Now what does that mean? It means that God came to Abraham and said, I'm giving you the gift of the land forever. But in the Mosaic covenant, he says that you will be able to possess the land and remain on the land conditionally only as long as you conform to the terms of this covenant that I'm giving through Moses. When you disobey the terms of the covenant, we see it spelled out in Deuteronomy 28, the land will vomit you out. But even when they're in exile, the principal prophets of the exile, Jeremiah and Ezekiel, said, we have been punished because of our disobedience to the terms of the covenant, and therefore we have lost possession of the land, but it's still our land. We still own the title. The prophet Ezekiel prophesied that one day God will cleanse the people of Israel from all their uncleannesses and idols. And his prophecy suggests that this will come after he takes them from all the countries of the world and brings them back to the land. I think Christians can say with confidence that the massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years from all over the world back to the land is absolutely unprecedented. And it looks remarkably like what all the prophets prophesied, not only the Old Testament, but also what the New Testament prophecies look forward to.
I want to read a verse to you and just get your thoughts on it, okay? He remembers his covenant forever, the promise he made for 1,000 generations, the covenant he made with Abraham, the oath he swore to Isaac. He confirmed it to Jacob as a decree, to Israel as an everlasting covenant. To you, I will give the land of Canaan as a portion you will inherit.
In Palestinian liberation theology, we do not take the Bible literally, and we don't see God as a real estate agent. We see that all land is the property of God, and we all have to be righteous to live in it.
Many Christians believe that the modern state of Israel is a partial fulfillment of biblical prophecy. But many Christians say the modern state of Israel is a secular, unbelieving state. There's no way this is God's doing.
The nation state itself, as a political entity, should not be linked with fulfillments of prophecies or not. Fulfillment of prophecy or not should be linked with the behavior and the conduct of the Jewish people and how they relate to the covenant between them and God. I think what God is looking at is the heart of the individual Jew and saying, are you being an agent of justice and righteousness? Are you being a light to all nations?
Is Israel currently obeying all the terms of Torah? No. I think any Israeli would tell you that. But let's think back to ourselves as Christians. Do we believe the church is perfectly obeying the triune God? Of course not.
If God cancels his promises, his love, etc., to Israel, because Israel turned from him, and I'm in trouble. I'm in big trouble. All of us have sinned. All of us have come short. And yet there's no condemnation because of the greatness of the love of God. I see the greatness of the love of God, not only in my Christ, but I see the greatness of the love of God in his love for the people of Israel.
I think the big thing is a partial fulfillment, because
Ezekiel 37, the vision of the valley of dry bones. Are you familiar with it? It's a step-by-step process. They're in the land. God brings back these dry bones, and he could hear them rattling, and then they're like standing up, and then he puts flesh and sinews and tendons on them, and they're walking around, and then he's like, where's the spirit? The last step is the spirit. And I see that, I mean, they would first have to come home, and he's going to be dealing with their individual hearts on a national level.
I cannot see, I just cannot comprehend in any way God's will for a certain group of people having to deal directly with the suffering of another people.
How do you feel about the Jewish settlements here in the West Bank?
سرطان.
اسم المغتصبات يعني هم ساكنين بأرض مش إلهم.
Why is Israel still taking land that is supposed to be handed over to the Palestinians to establish their state and building these big towns and cities with all the facilities?
After the war of 1948, the West Bank was controlled by Jordan. In 1967, under threat of attack, Israel launched a defensive war against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. As a result, Israel gained control of East Jerusalem and the West Bank. They also took control of Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt and the Golan Heights from Syria. In a peace treaty with Israel in 1979, Egypt was given back the Sinai Peninsula. In 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza, and the terrorist organization Hamas seized control of the region. Many Israelis and Palestinians believe the West Bank belongs to them, which is why it's called disputed territory. Multiple attempts at negotiating a peace agreement have failed, including offers from Israel that would have given Palestinians control over most of the West Bank. With no peace deal in sight, Israel has been building Jewish settlements in these disputed territories. Some settlements are located where Jews were forced out of their villages during the War of 1948, but others have been built in areas where there was no Jewish presence during the war. Many contend that these settlements are the biggest obstacle to peace in the region, and that settlers are the embodiment of extreme anti-Arab prejudice.
We do have radical fringe elements within our society that are there and see things through those lenses, but it's not the majority of the Israeli people.
There's a group called price tag, religious extreme settlers who do not acknowledge the rule of the state of Israel. And they basically do whatever they like.
This village is targeted by the settlers always.
I'm looking at the settlement as a place that take the land. On the other side, I learn how to understand how the Jewish had a connection to this land, to Judea and Samaria.
West Bank, it really truly is a misnomer. It's a name that was attached to this region when Jordan laid claim to the area. It's the alternative to the historic and heritage name of this region, which is Judea Samaria.
Arabs in general are from Arabia, and Jews are from Judea.
When I read the Bible and I know that Jews has been here since more than 3,000 years in this land, how I could believe that Jewish have no history here?
So this is the path that Abraham took.
This path is where Jews made their pilgrimage on the way to the temple.
That's cool.
They found this mikveh, this baptizing ritual pool. This was used by Jews living in the Roman time, making their way 3 times a year to the temple in Jerusalem.
Todd.
Yeah.
The main man. How you doing?
I don't know, I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Couldn't be better. The Bible here comes to life. And when you're walking in these places, you literally find history and archaeology when you're working in the garden. Judea and Samaria is my homeland. This is my archaeology, and there's miles of it. There's tons of it. What you are told is that settlers like me hate. So I'm telling you directly, I don't hate. We go shopping in the supermarket. Half the people there are Arab. No problem at all. I speak Arabic. You are a neighbor. You are living here for hundreds of years, or 100 years, or 1,000 years. I have no problem with you at all. But if you throw a stone at me or try and stab me, I will kill you. So this is my chalet. Me and my wife had a dream of hosting people. This is my wife,
Todd.
Klila.
Nice to meet you.
I made everything here.
And did you have to get a permit to build?
No permit, nothing here is legal.
Explain that.
The land is land belonging to the state of Israel, but our Zionistic job is to challenge the system.
So Miri, many in the international community think that settlements like yours are the major obstacle to peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
Does he look like an obstacle to peace? He's an obstacle to a clean house. But you know, like the communities here, that's what it's about. Like there's families and kids, and synagogues. My oldest son, he's 4.5. And he's already like old enough to understand what's going on and stuff like that. We educate him to respect the other side. And if he comes back and asks me, are all the Arabs bad? I said, no, there's bad people in every place, in every city, in every community. And unfortunately, I don't think that the other side, that's the answers that the mothers give their children. And only when that changes, there'll be less obstacle to peace.
One of our problems with the settlements is the distribution of water. The Israelis gives percentage of water to settlements more than needs, and the consequences of what that we take less than what we need.
50 years ago, before there were any Jews reestablished here in Judea and Samaria, they had even less resources. 50 years later, they would even have even more so if the Palestinian Authority weren't boycotting the water authority, the energy authority of Israel.
I'm trying to see the entire picture. There are two sides. One is the Israeli side, which is the distribution of water. The other side is the Palestinian fault, repairing or fixing the infrastructure itself. We have these infrastructure from decades.
So they have the money, it's been donated to it, but they won't do anything about it.
They're supposed to do this, but actually nobody knows where the money goes.
Were you a soldier at one point?
Yeah, I'm still a soldier. I was in the Goldstein massacre in '94, and I was a medic in my unit, and I was taking care of an Arab that got shot. And as I was giving him an IV, someone behind me tried to stab me, and he slipped on something, and he fell and stabbed me in my leg. I see a wounded person. I don't ask how he got wounded. I don't ask what's his religion. I see a person in need. I help the person in need, period.
The impression that we get in the West is that IDF soldiers kill Palestinian kids for fun.
Hundreds of years ago, there were stories about Jewish people slaughtering Christian children for making matzah for Passover. And there were massacres throughout Europe because of these stories.
This is my parents' house.
Oh, cool.
And this is the neighbor's house that unfortunately, that's where it happened. And this was the house of the grandparents. They had their kids over with the grandchildren. The terrorist came out of a village, which is 2.5 hours walk from here. He walked all the way here, and he opened the door, and he just started stabbing people. Yossi was killed, the father of the family, and 2 of his children. They see the killing of anybody that is part of the Israeli entity, the Zionist entity, as something that is sacred, which is the real obstacle to peace. He smiled in court, proud of what he did, being paid an amazing salary for the rest of his life.
No one here celebrates and throws candy when people die. Any people die. This is not a Jewish thing to do.
It's a culture that celebrates the killing of another people in order to get what they think they deserve, which is the entire land of Israel. It has nothing to do with Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, the settlements. They were not willing to accept the existence of Jews over here ever since day one.
We're driving here to this ranch, here in the Judean desert. Oasis in the middle of the desert.
Whoa.
These are all olive trees here.
It's amazing.
Cultivating the desert, making the desert come to life, fulfilling the prophecies.
Hey, Todd.
Nice to meet you. This is my good friend Ari.
Ari, nice to meet you.
Lives here in the Judean desert.
Yeah, you have a beautiful place. Tell me, where are you from?
Born in Houston, Texas, but that's just because the temple was destroyed and we were exiled all around the world. So I rectified that as soon as I could. Right after high school, I came here to Israel just for a visit. Well, it was supposed to be a visit, but I just fell in love with it. I couldn't leave. You know, I'm a believer. I'm a believer in God and in the Torah and in the words of the prophets. And they say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea and the mountains blossoming. King David grew up in Bethlehem, so it was in these mountains that he composed the Psalms. It was in these mountains that he hid from Saul. These were the mountains that were his backyard. He was a shepherd.
So there's many people who would say you're a Western colonizer.
Colonizer means there was someone here before us. When we came out to these mountains, there was nobody here, totally empty. You know, you drove here and you see all these Jewish villages. They're all surrounded by fences and security and arms. We had to decide early on, are we going to invest in fences or in trees? And we said trees. So when we first came out here, I remember that the Arabs, they were coming out and they were throwing rocks at us. And then they saw we were actually building something real here, and the same ones eventually started coming and saying, you know, I know how to do floors, I'm really good at walls, and we started hiring the same Arabs that were throwing rocks at us. We are a self-sustaining ecological farm, a retreat center. Maim lishtot? Atem rotzim lishtot? Maim? Sometimes it's hard, there's like a disconnect in my mind between the greater conflict and the fact that this is supposed to be the epicenter of this conflict. And at the same time, it seems like the friendliest place. There's a certain economic prosperity and peace that I feel like has brought about a deeper sort of peace that happens when you meet each other and know each other. And even the Beit Tfilah, the house of prayer that we're building on the top of the mountain right here. I've sat with him and spoken with him and told him we're building this to worship the one God of the world. The God of our father, Abraham, right? You're Yishmael and we're Isaac. And so we're brothers. And he loved us both. It's not that this land belongs to me, it's that I belong to the land, meaning that others can belong to the land also. If they want to live in peace with us, that would be great. So we're here and they're here, we're neighbors.
The Arabs who live under the Palestinian Authority, they live in a fierce society. So within this society, we have these dots of Jewish communities. They represent the free society. So if people are really interested in peace, they would, ironically enough, as much as it goes against all mainstream thought, would be to support Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria and help them grow. And not only help them grow, but make sure that those fierce societies outside have pressure on them to say, you need to be more like them. When two free societies live side by side or even intertwined with each other, that's when there's going to be real peace.
I know that there's settlers who are racist and they don't want anything to do with Palestinians and they want to get rid of them. But the settlers that I met completely shifted the way I thought of them. Very kind, generous. They really wanted to get along with their Palestinian neighbors. They called each other neighbors and they had a lot of Palestinian friends.
Zionist state. Americans boycotted Nazi Germany in response to dehumanization, imprisonment, and genocide of Jewish people. So I can't stand by and watch this attack on our freedom of speech and the right to boycott the racist policies of the government and the state of Israel.
Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar proposing a resolution supporting the right to boycott Israel, likening the boycott of the Jewish state to boycotts of Nazi Germany.
What is the BDS movement?
What they say is until Israel gives full citizenship to 7.25 million descendants of Palestinian refugees from 1948, which obviously means Arab Muslims become the majority, Jews become the minority, and the Jewish state ceases to exist. Until that happens, we need to boycott Israeli professors, we need to divest from Israeli companies, we need to sanction them in every way possible and have absolutely no dialogue.
BDS is a bullshit purity test by people who want to appear woke but actually slept through history class. It's Omar Barghouti, his quote, "No Palestinian, rational Palestinian, not a sellout Palestinian, will ever accept a Jewish state in Palestine." So that's where that comes from, this movement. Someone who doesn't even want a Jewish state at all. Somehow this side never gets presented in the American media. It's very odd.
BDS is anti-Semitic, it's anti-Palestinian, and it's anti-peace. It's anti-Semitic because the first thing that Hitler did was to declare a boycott of Jewish businesses. We're going to break them economically so we can eventually destroy them physically. It's anti-Palestinian. They don't care about the, 100,000 Palestinians that work in Israeli-owned businesses every day that put food on the table for about 1 million people a day. And it's anti-peace because it's against any dialogue whatsoever. And the fact that there are actually churches and Christian organizations that are supporting this is an absolute shame.
From the time that the first Jew, Abraham, set foot on this land, it was a land that was populated by others. So it's not for the Jewish people to own in the sense that you own a car. It's a responsibility to steward. And stewarding a land means giving opportunities to everyone. Roughly 70 to 80% of the workforce in the industrial parks are Palestinians. They earn full Israeli-grade salaries, and full Israeli social benefits are provided to them. This is Todd. This factory has a cross-section of all kinds of Israelis. He's from Russia, former Soviet Union. These gentlemen are Palestinians.
Nice to meet you.
They make 3,000 cakes an hour.
What? So a Jew and a Palestinian working together, you have a good relationship?
Yes.
You like working together? No problems?
Totally.
I'm reading all of the newspapers that the people that live in the settlements hate Arabs.
With 4 years of work at an Israeli factory, he's already managed to build his own private home.
Wow.
250 square meters.
That's over 1,500 square feet than my home. Way to go. Good job. Do you think I can get a job here?
I will give you 1 month, you will be good.
It's like Amazon Fresh.
This factory is ours. I feel that this factory is ours.
Yuda, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
This is Todd.
Todd.
Hi, nice to meet you.
This factory working 24 hours a day, full 6 days a week.
Really?
We know how to go for vacation together, and of course we know how to work and to make the company success together. Nelson Mandela said, enemies, when they will work together, they will break the wall between them. And I believe on that.
Do you enjoy working together with Jews?
אני אוהב לעבוד עם הישראלים.
And how is your salary compared to the average Palestinian salary?
יש הבדל גדול. 5 פעמים. פרנס את המשפחה שלי. אבל אני, כמעט היה לי 2 בנות באוניברסיטה, סיימו.
So if this place was to shut down because of international pressure, how would you feel?
העובד הפלסטינאים הראשון הוא נפגע. נסגר המפעלים, אז אין לו עבודה. קרה בהרבה מפעלים, סגרו, העובדים שלהם ישבו בבית.
Boycotts don't harm Israeli companies. The only people who may be harmed are the Palestinian employees.
All around the world, also in the Palestinian Authority, they try to boycott my product. The BDS try to destroy me. I'm the solution, I'm not the problem. If we will build more and more industrial area, maybe we will bring more and more hope for the world, more hope for people. And maybe from us, the peace will come.
As a Palestinian, when we grow up in a hateful society, becoming a man of love for the Jews and sharing the loves of God that change our heart, that could make incredible work for the people of Israel. I believe the main responsibility is on the Palestinian Christian. I remember each day I crossed the checkpoint that I was praying that God please allow them to stop me, that I will share the gospel with them. Each time they stop me and they ask me from where you are, I tell them I'm from Gaza. They got shocked and scared because most of the criminals came from Gaza. I tell them how I use it to hate them, and God, Elohim, changed my heart and I start to love them. They were weeping. As soldiers, meeting a guy from Gaza, telling him how much he loved them. If we accept to love them, if we get rid of the bitterness and we accept God's love, we have a very powerful message.
So I've been invited to teach a surf class to a group of Israelis, both Jews and Arabs. And the one thing I've learned is that the more the two groups interact with each other, the better. It helps diffuse the lies that have been told about each other, and it really helps build true friendships.
It's my first time that I try to surf really with a teacher that they know to surf good. And we will see if I will felt a lot today or make this good.
I don't have a lot of connections with Arabs on daily basis. The several that I do have are all on the basis and possible only because of the gospel, because of really grasping and holding to the gospel, of realizing what the Lord did for me, and it forgave me. So how can I not forgive my brother?
God look on all the people the same. If you are Arabic, you start to look to a Jewish people that they like you. It's the same. This is what God make in our heart when we start to believe in Jesus.
My faith compels me to love my Arab neighbor by rising above boundaries of nationality, culture, prejudices, and to really see my Arab neighbor as God sees him and love him.
It seems that many Christian Zionists are excited about the reestablishment of Israel because they see it as ushering in the end times and the return of Christ. But to have only this as your motivation seems to miss a mark.
It's selfish, which is the opposite of the Christian ethic of love, to care for others.
If you really believe the Bible narrative that everyone's created in the image of their maker, then both peoples on both sides of the conflict have the highest inherent value of their lives. And we should all be looking for ways and advocating for ways to make life better for both people on both sides of the conflict.
Peace can only be the painful compromise from both sides.
I'm raising 3 children in the state of Israel. My hope is that both sides will understand that we're not going to agree on the past. Not agreeing on the past means that we can look to the future without trying to justify who's more right about the past. I'm hopeful that people with children will try and look towards the future and not towards the past.
How can the church actually transcend the political discussion and be the agents that actually bring people to the table? Not about political solutions, not about agreements, but about this grassroots movement that needs to happen, the foundation for the right political solution to be manifested.
There was a time when I viewed the Palestinians as my enemy, getting in the way of God's plan for Israel. Now that I've seen life through their eyes, God has changed my heart toward them. I now see the West Bank as a beautiful place with beautiful people and a strong connection to the land. But the Palestinians here live under an oppressive regime that keeps them in fear of speaking out against it. Their government continues to reject Israel's right to exist and has made little effort to educate for peace, keeping generations of people stuck in a cycle of victimhood and conflict. I also see that it's hard for them to watch as Israel continues to build or expand settlements on land that they want for their own state. If I grew up in the West Bank and all I was taught was that the Jews were evil occupiers, and I frequently saw soldiers and checkpoints, it'd be very easy for me to view them as my enemy. As for the Palestinian Christians, I believe that if they recognize the Jewish roots of their faith and God's continued plan for the nation of Israel, that would be the key to God doing something extraordinary to heal the rift between the two peoples. But the consequences of supporting Israel and the Palestinian society are extremely high, and very few are brave enough to question the status quo.
I cannot stop telling the truth. Some people trying to remain silent for fear. But what is God put in our heart is not the spirit of fear. This is what the Bible tells us.
The church should educate itself about the Jewish people, about its own roots. God told Jacob, "Whoever stands with you, I will stand with him."
The Gospels were birthed in the soil of Judaism. I cannot know who I am spiritually without seeing my connection to Israel.
To me, the Jewish dream of returning to their homeland is a beautiful one. After 2,000 years of persecution from around the world, they deserve their own place where they can feel safe. To many, the term Zionist will always be controversial. Both good and evil have been carried out in the name of Zionism. As an American, I can acknowledge that parts of my country's founding were very dark. But ultimately, my country became a light to all the nations of the world. Israel's far from perfect, but despite its flaws, I still believe it's a noble nation. So I choose to love and support the Jewish people by standing for their right to be in the land. And to love and support the Palestinians by acknowledging the hardships they face and supporting those who are among them, risking their lives to share the truth. And to love and support both sides by urging them to form relationships that better help them understand each other. Ultimately, the people I've met here have taught me that there is hope for this land. I still don't understand so much about this conflict, and maybe I'll never understand all of it. What I do know is I see God's hand working in Israel and in the nations, and it's like a river. It's flowing to a certain destination, and as a Christian, I get to play a role. I get to be a part of what God is doing, and that's exciting to me.